First year sleep, second year creep, third year leap. It's definitely a very helpful phrase to remember, or it is at least when you're referring to plants. I wouldn't use it to describe yourself in a job interview or a first date, that's not going to go well. But when it comes to our gardens, it's a very helpful reminder about patience, but it's also the main reason why I'm so excited about the growth here in our garden this year. Today I want to share with you an area of planting that I've been working on over the past couple of sunny May weekends. I want to tell you why this phrase is the number one reason why your garden plants don't look like the ones you've seen online or at gardens you've visited just yet. And then I want to give you a few tips on how you can help your plants settle in quicker and get more growth out of them faster. So let's get started. Are you dreaming then of your own beautiful tropical paradise? I know I am too, but today, this is more what I'm looking at. Now, usually I begin my videos by saying ignore the mess, but this time around I really am taking that to the next level. There's rubble everywhere. I haven't even done my annual spring weed clear up yet, so you'll have to ignore that. But on the plus side, the garden is full of these bright zingy lime colours. It's such a vibrant time of year, and the garden is full of life. Tucked in behind the beautiful tree ferns then, which I'm so thankful are bouncing back from a hard winter this year. They really are starting to look incredible this week. We've got this area here, an area of concrete that was already in the garden, one of the few bits that was actually here, and it's tucked in next to my brick shed. And this area, well, it's had a few problems like any garden has, and I'll tell you a bit more about them. Hopefully you can hear me over next door's lawnmower. It's one of those days where you just have to be outside, the sun's shining, it really is beautiful. Problem one then, you can probably see the birds up there, eager to move in. We've got a blue tit up there, a little sparrow over there. I actually won a greenhouse a few months after we moved in, December 2020, and this was the perfect area for it because mainly I'm lazy. This was the right spot. There's already concrete here, but that greenhouse never came to me. Unfortunately, the company wasn't what they promised to be. The greenhouse never turned up. I don't want to dwell on the issue or make it the topic of today's video, but all I'll say is if you're looking at spending a lot of money on a greenhouse, definitely do a bit of research first and check out the reviews on the company. See other people's real experiences dealing with them, and hopefully that will steer you towards an excellent purchase that you can enjoy for years to come. But I want to talk about now why that greenhouse actually turned out to be a silver lining. And that's because if I had put the greenhouse there, I would have restricted the whole garden. The whole garden would essentially been then a path from one end to the other. Yes, it would have been a beautiful spot to not just protect, but also display rare and unusual plants from all around the world. But also it would have kind of closed this area off. Whereas now, in the future, I can actually build a patio or something here, have some seating, and it becomes a nice shady sort of halfway point as you're heading towards the sunny area of the garden. So that's definitely a silver lining that I can see here. The second issue I faced then was planting up the narrow border at the back. I remember putting out a video, probably one of my first garden tours, asking what you guys would like to see here. And that was the point when I was going to have the greenhouse and it's going to be even more of a restricted planting area. I just couldn't decide really, should something taller but more narrow growing go there, or should I have lower growing plants, maybe some climbers coming across from the brick shed. There's a lot of different options, but none of them really grabbed me. I know bamboo are a fantastic evergreen plant, great vertical interest, beautiful colours. That was a plant I actually wanted to grow here myself, but the area was just too narrow. So what I did, I actually cheated. If you want to know how to plant up a narrow border, the first tip is make it less narrow. So I got out the brick saw and I chopped off about another 300, 400 mil, about 1.5 foot of concrete, which is where all this rubble's come from. But I won't be wasting that, it'll come in very handy, making a foundation for my other bigger spring project. So what I did a couple of weekends ago is dug out all the soil that's in there and then planted, or I actually used this rhizome barrier first, which is essentially a plastic membrane that stops the bamboo rhizomes and roots reaching out, spreading like bamboo can do into next door's garden or popping up along the roots of the other plants up there. I'll talk more about that in another video, but essentially I've chosen these bamboo here because I was already growing them in other parts of the garden. I moved them across and I think they'll go really well here, providing great vertical evergreen interest. There were divisions that I bought around 3 years ago. They're planted into this garden here, and as you can see now, they're about 2 meters tall, something like that, and ready to really get going. Now, I have just transplanted them, so it will set them back a bit this year, but I'm sure they'll grow away nicely. Now, this variety is actually Phyllostachys vivax huangwensu inversa, which is a bit of a mouthful, but essentially all it means is it's got the same sort of yellow golden colour that Vivax auriculis has, but it also has this green. And if you look closely, you'll see it actually alternates between the two. So it really is a cool looking plant. And whilst this area isn't really big enough for two mature Phyllostachys bamboos, I know it will make them grow a little bit smaller. I like the idea of having essentially a tall vertical fence of these right behind this area here. And the other great thing is, it won't take up too much horizontal room either. They'll grow upright and not hang over you too much when you're trying to eat or chill out here. Now, the third problem then, it's about the phoenix. You might remember a Phoenix Canariensis was growing right there. Was being the operative word there. Unfortunately, I did my little, well, I suppose late winter tour of the garden, saying that I was moderately optimistic that it was going to bounce back. Remy's out here just nibbling away if you wonder what that noise is. I thought it was going to bounce back. It did look mostly green, but about 3 weeks after I did that video, as can happen with palms, the first warm day, and the whole top section of the palm, it completely spear pulled. It was rotten right to the core. Is it the best palm to grow in my northern garden? Potentially not. And I think that's the thing really. You learn a bit of realism with experience. Yes, on paper, Phoenix Canariensis, it might be an increasingly likely choice for UK exotic gardens, given that the temperatures are actually going to increase on average. But on average doesn't mean that cold events are less likely to happen. And in fact, the opposite might be true. We might have more real cold winter blasts. And Phoenix Canariensis here in my garden, even in this sheltered sunny spot with a brick wall there, it's not enough to keep it alive, clearly. So I've replaced it with some hardier options, and I'll show you what those are right now. So starting at the back then, we've got the Trachycarpus fortunei with a strip trunk. You saw me plant that in one of my videos last spring, and also the Chamaerops, Chamaerops, however you want to pronounce it. That's Chamaerops humilis vulcano, which is an amazing compact form. And at the back, I actually had a formium there. I think it was a Platts Black. The winter also took that out. I do know that the colourful formiums, they're not the toughest of plants, particularly when you get a very cold winter. So I've replaced it with one that's equally colourful, but I want to give it a second chance. I really like that pop of red there. So those were the three plants that are in already, as well as this Berinda papyrifera, blue bamboo. You can see there, it's starting to shoot away, and that gives a really great backdrop. So in front of that, I've gone for another Chamaerops. This one is just the standard, the normal Chamaerops humilis, Mediterranean dwarf fan palm. I will have some lower level planting around them, I just haven't done it yet. And at this part of the garden here, I've got another Trachycarpus fortunei princeps hybrid. I don't know if it's the same as the new fawn hybrid, but I know they're a very fast grower, beautiful leaves with a gorgeous sort of silvery blue underside. And having that there, it mirrors the larger one that I've got at this side, which really is a stunning plant, and it has to be one of my favourite palms in the garden. So that was the thinking there. So let me tell you more about the whole first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap, and how it applies to these kind of plants. There are some plants then that seem to grow the second you plant them, like this awesomely fast growing eucalyptus. There's others, perennials, plants like persicaria, that seem to settle in incredibly quickly. You can almost see them growing. But I first heard the phrase first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap when referring to bamboo, which might seem a bit weird because you think of bamboo as being such fast growing plants, and indeed they are, both in terms of how fast the culms grow every year and how fast the plant can expand, not just outwards but also upwards, racing towards the sky. And I also talk a lot about palms in my garden. The same phrase applies. I often say how fast palms can grow. Growing a foot of trunk a year is pretty average in UK gardens, so they don't hang about at all. But why does this phrase really mean so much when talking about fast growing plants? It's simply because any plant, whether it's an exotic, whether it's bamboo, a palm, or even a more normal garden perennial plant, even trees, they all take a while to settle in. And whether you've bought a plant that's in a pot, you need to consider, particularly in the case of Trachycarpus, if they're in a small pot, they haven't been grown in that pot. They've actually been harvested, potentially grown in a field in Europe somewhere, dug up, most of the roots chopped off, and then placed into a small pot. So they've got a very artificially restrained root system. That's not ideal for long-term growth. And the same thing goes for bamboo. These bamboos have been dug up, transplanted from another part of the garden. The root system won't be intact no matter how careful I was to get it all. So those are going to take a while again to settle in, to get the roots down. And it's not just recently planted pot plants. or transplanted plants that take a while to settle in, divisions especially, can really take a while to actually grow away again. So if you've bought a large bamboo, if you bought something the size of this in a pot, it doesn't mean that this year's new growth will actually be the same size as the canes that are there already. They take a while to actually settle in. And that's because when we grow a lot of plants, the main thing we're focused on is seeing visible growth, getting that quick instant impact above ground. The plant, however, has other priorities. A plant's main priority is building up the root system below the ground. That's what gives a plant the long-term success, the resilience, the ability to take up all the nutrients and water it needs to support the growth. That's its first priority. And that's the main reason why when you plant a plant, whether it's a young palm, a bamboo like this that's been transplanted, or a division, or even a plant that you might assume is larger and faster growing like this Trachycarpus here, they do still take a while to settle in. And that's where the first year sleep definitely applies. Any kind of plant you grow in your garden, even perennials that settle in quite nicely, definitely have a year of steadier growth while they get the roots down, get over the shock of being planted, transplanted, dug up and moved. And then that second year, you can see them size up a little bit. But it's not until the third year, like this bamboo here, the Berinda papyrifera CS 1046, they really get going. You can see now that one's pushing out a beautiful blue culm, and that is the main reason why I'm so excited to see how the garden grows here this year. It's our third year here, and a lot of the plants were actually planted in the second half of 2020, including this bamboo. So I'm really excited now to see, with an established root system, with a nice warm summer last year, the rhizomes will be charged up, everything will be settling nicely, and what they want to do now is really grow. As for these younger plants, you might have noticed that our plant is small. So yes, it is going to be a couple of years before I see some real growth from them, but I'd still recommend planting small. There's so many advantages. So I get it, then you're probably a bit annoyed now. You spent months watching my videos, planning your garden, thinking, yes, bamboos, Georges, they're great for instant vertical impact. Trachycarpus palms, incredibly well suited for UK gardens. They also grow very quickly. And now you're telling me that they don't. Well, actually, they do. You just have to be a bit patient at first. I know patience is a dirty word in gardening, and myself, I'm just as guilty as anyone else when it comes to instant impact. Like the Trachycarpus behind me here, those I got an incredibly good price that I couldn't pass up. Yes, I had to move them here with everything else, but I'm as guilty as anyone for wanting to get those large plants initially, but it's often not the best way forwards. And my first step, if you want a healthy, fast-growing garden long-term, is to not be afraid of growing small plants. If you start off small when it comes to trees, palms, shrubs, a lot of plants like that, they settle in so much faster. And that often comes from the fact that a lot of them might be pot grown. That plant has literally germinated or grown inside that pot. It's not been dug up from a field, had most of its roots chopped off, and is then having to recover in a tiny little pot. That plant's got a nice root system that hasn't been set back. And if you start small, that plant can get those roots into the ground straight away. It's not worried about recovering. It'll look healthy. It'll often have more leaves lower down, be a beautiful dark green colour a lot quicker, and long term you will certainly have a better palm for it. It also applies to trees as well, so many different garden plants. Even these structural permanent plants, if you're not afraid of starting small, long term you'll get a lot better result out of it. Now, I know that's hard to hear and even harder to actually follow, but genuinely, if you look back at my other videos, Mark's garden is a great example. It's got a Trachycarpus palm that definitely looks like it's sulking a bit. It's only growing very slowly, doesn't look especially healthy, but then right next to it, it's got one that was planted as a small palm. It looks incredibly healthy, such a beautiful green colour, and it's actually well on its way to overtaking the palm next to it. So if you start small, yes, you don't have that visual interest immediately, but long term, your palm or tree, shrub, whatever it is, will look so much better and be so much more resilient, healthier, and beautiful as a result. So honestly, I know it's not the advice you want to hear, but if you are planting a garden this spring, if you're putting new palms, shrubs, trees into the ground, then definitely consider planting small and reaping the benefits long term. And if you're interested in this, I will actually be planting quite a few different palms at the far end of my garden over about the next month or so, and I'll share those with you very soon. I've actually got a swarm of bees just in the garden over there, so if you see me nervously looking around, that's the reason why. But yes, like I said, small plants are definitely the way to go. And with palms and stuff, they will still take some time to settle in, but you'll find that they will grow away quicker than an established specimen in a small pot, and the same goes for bamboos. In fact, probably even more so bamboos. If you buy a large plant with especially thick culms already, yes, you get that instant impact, but it's going to take a few years, a good few years, before it really settles in, builds enough of a rhizome root mass to actually support sending new culms out the same size. Whereas if you start small, like I did with these Phagacea robusta Campbell behind me, they grow so much faster. Yes, they might look a bit grass-like when you first buy a plant in maybe a 5-litre pot, but that bamboo will double in size every year. You'll get to enjoy seeing new culms that are maybe twice as thick, even thicker than the previous years, going up, up and up. And by year 3, if you put your young plant against that mature one, it'll definitely be well on its way to keeping up with it. And not only keeping up with it, but with so much more vigour and energy to keep growing beyond that year. So definitely planting small is a great tip. It won't avoid the whole 3-year question, but it will help the plant to settle in nicely and speed away a good bit quicker. But what's the next best thing that you can do to really help your plants settle in fast and get grown really quickly? It's all about choosing the right spot in your garden and applying good planting practices. Okay, there's a lot of bees there now. Definitely time to move. So it appears a swarm of bees is actually following me, which definitely puts a bit of time pressure in finishing this video. Monty doesn't have these problems, does he? But anyway, we'll crack on and I'll show you the planting. So heading back up this way then, whilst this area, it definitely wasn't suitable for the Phoenix long term. Unfortunately, that palm just wasn't hardy enough for my garden. That doesn't change the fact that it is quite a sheltered spot, and considering it is in the shady part of the garden, it does actually see a decent amount of sun, and that's because north is pretty much that way, so you get that west sun just pointing there, that beautiful evening sun right at the brick shed. So it's quite warm, quite sheltered. And what I did, seeing as I'd actually had to dig out the Phoenix Canariensis root ball, which was pretty massive, I had a nice big hole in the garden. I put some sharp grit sand at the bottom of it to improve the drainage, and that's because these Chamaerops humilis do prefer a sunny spot and good drainage. The bamboo at the back potentially needs sort of normal garden soil, but it will cope regardless. So what I did was actually to improve the spot where the plants are going, and I did the same thing with the bamboos at the back here. So whilst I haven't topped the soil level up just yet, what I will be adding to the top of these bamboos here, to just below the height of the rhizome barrier. Quick tip, if you always have your bamboo barrier pointing out about 50mm, 2 inches above the surface of the soil, it not only stops the rhizome escaping over the top of it, but it also gives you a bit of room to put organic matter like farmyard manure, soil improver, and old leaves on the top of it. And those are the perfect things to really improve soil for bamboos. Bamboos love a nice, rich, moisture retentive soil full of organic matter. So that's exactly what I'll be doing for these bamboos here. I'll give them a nice layer, a nice thick mulch of some kind of soil conditioner, and that really helps them settle in. So the top tip, if you want to speed up how fast your plant actually settles in, is to plant it using the right methods. Find out what that plant likes, and generally speaking, most plants, well, I suppose most plants are quite adaptable, can grow in any kind of garden soil, but most exotic plants either prefer a nice, rich, moisture retentive, organic matter-filled soil, or they prefer strong, sharp drainage, like these Chamaerops here. So ultimately, do a little bit of research into your plant. Don't be afraid of starting small, and don't be afraid of putting in the effort, spending a bit of money, whether it's on some kind of horticultural grit or organic matter, to really improve the soil and give the plant the best start possible. The sound of the bees behind me now is really intensifying, but let's get back to the topic at hand. You've started off then with a healthy young plant. That's great, it's going to grow the best long term. You've chosen the right spot in your garden. If it's a sun-loving plant, give it a sunny spot. If it prefers a bit of shade, a bit of shelter, like a tree fern, then definitely choose a better spot for those needs. And you've then improved the soil. You've added organic matter or grit, depending on that plant's drainage needs. Roughly speaking, if a plant's an arid plant or a palm from a warmer climate, it does prefer grit or some kind of raised bed. Or if it's a woodland plant, a plant that needs a lot of organic matter to really get big leaves, then adding soil conditioner, farmyard manure, anything like that really gives it a great start. But the next thing that you can do, probably the most important of these, is to help it settle in the first year. A lot of the palms, you might assume, come from drier, warmer environments in the UK, and largely that is true, but they still need water to help them settle in the first year. So if I could say anything, it's if you're planting a shrub, a tree, a palm, a bamboo, Even ones that are tougher, that are less water demanding long term, still give them water to help them settle in the first year. Those plants, whether from pots, transplanted, divided, whatever they are, those need a lot of water to help build up that root system. Essentially at the minute, that plant has got a very small root system compared to the overall size of the top growth. So it needs that working properly, it needs to have adequate moisture. But with good moisture the first year, and ideally the second year as well, particularly during dry summer spells, those plants will be set up best for growth long term. It really is, again, the best thing you can do. And if you don't water a palm properly in the first summer, its roots don't really settle in properly, and you're definitely slowing down the whole establishment process. So essentially, with a three-pronged approach of choosing the right plant in the first place, using the right planting practices and spot in your garden, and giving it a bit of extra TLC in its first year, you can really speed up the whole 3-year process. On one note about feeding, definitely don't overfeed your plants. There's no real benefit and there's potential drawbacks to it. Sure, I talk about feeding Gunnera, Ensete, Cannas, Colocasia, the real big leaf and more tropical plants. You can give them loads of food in the summer. They produce loads of big leaves from all that nitrogen. But when it comes to the permanent structural planting, shrubs, palms, trees, bamboos, you want to give them the right feed to support their growth cycle and not a huge amount of it. Because the last thing you want is a load of just floppy, soft top growth that won't survive these colder winter spells. It'll get buffeted around in the wind. You just want to give that plant the right feed for its needs. Check out my other videos for more tips on feeding bamboos, palms, and all these other kinds of plants. And if there's anything you want to know, leave me a comment in the section below. So essentially today's video is me trying to combine two things, showing off a new area of planting that I've been working on. Definitely not the finished result, but I wanted to have a more evergreen, beautiful exotic area that'll provide not only a great backdrop for these videos, but also be a nice sort of planting area to go alongside future seating area plans and just a part of the garden that I really want to enjoy more. And it's also worth combining that with the whole first year sleep, second year creep, third year leap. An important reminder that patience is important, even when it comes to fast growing exotic plants. And I think if you want to leave this video with one thing, it's don't be afraid to wait for your plants to develop. If they're not growing as fast as you want them to, it might not be because you've done something wrong. It could just be those plants need more time to settle in, build up that strong root system, and then they'll really take off. I think the thing about gardening is it's too easy to be focused on the now, what we're doing this summer, when you got to realize that a lot of these plants, they'll hopefully happily grow away for years and years. They're going to be in the ground a long time. So rather than focusing on just that instant impact for your gratification, think about what that plant can look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time. If there's one thing that having a nearly 6-month-old baby will teach you, it's that time absolutely flies by. That time's going to pass by regardless. So you might as well have some cool new plants in the ground, establishing, developing, and looking bigger and better every year. And if there's one ingredient that separates your plants in your garden now from those amazing plants you might have seen on different garden visits, potentially some of the garden tours on my channel, that ingredient is simply time. That is the one thing separating your plants now from the amazing specimens they might become. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, got something from it, and I hope more importantly, you actually get to enjoy some sunny spring weather yourselves over the next couple of weeks. It definitely makes it a beautiful treat just to be outside. Thank you always for watching. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I try to get back to each and every one of you as soon as I can anyway. Thanks as always, see you later.